What's going on, everybody? It's Saurav Goswami back again, and in these videos we are going to talk about the ruby-c extension. Now, the ruby-c extension or the ruby-c API is the fastest way to do Ruby, but there could be a lot of bugs, and also you need to know C to follow along with these videos. So in this video, I'm going to create some C files and load that in Ruby, as I mentioned in the earlier videos. So in my case, I'm going to the remdix directory. You don't have to do anything. You can just create a new directory called abcd or something like that. And let's do that, mkdir. And let's create a directory called donkey, for example. And let's cd into donkey. You can call it anything you want. And now in the ruby-c extension, we have two files called xtconf.rb. And another one is the C file that we are going to call it donkey.c as well. It doesn't matter if you are inside donkey directory or abcd directory, it doesn't matter. You can call it anything you want, but for the time being, I'll just call it donkey.c. Now we have to create a file called xtconf.rb, and here we are going to require the make file in Ruby. It's called mkmf, and we are going to create a make file called donkey, and it is very important. If you have a file called donkey.c, you have to make sure you're calling it donkey, right? Yeah, you can call it abcd if you want, but in the C file you have to mention that. So we are going to do that right now. If I cat it out again, you can see you have require mkmf and create makefile donkey, and that's it. That's what you need to do. And let's now create one file called donkey.c. You can call it anything you want, but inside the file we need to create one function called void init and then the small case donkey, and this is very important, right? The name you mentioned in the mkmf.rb has to be exactly this, right? So if you call it abcd, you have to mention that in the makefile, in the create makefile method, right? Now we also need to have include the ruby.h header file, but in many systems you cannot see the Ruby header file by default. So in Debian based system, for example, you need to run sudo apt install rubydev. Also you need the gcc compiler or clang compiler or anything that you use to compile the Ruby. In our case it is gcc. I do have gcc installed. I do have rubydev installed because on Arch Linux or Manjaro you can just run sudo pacman -s ruby and you do have the Ruby header file. So in Debian, you need to do this, and also you need the make command because we are going to need it to compile our codes into share objects. So that's the command you need to run in Debian based systems, or most likely in Fedora as well. And in Arch Linux, for example, it should be pacman -s ruby gcc and make. That's it. rubydev, as I said, comes with a Ruby package. So we do have init donkey here. Now we have to do something here, right? For the time being, as you can see, I have to write it and exit it, and then I have to run some other commands. So I'm going to launch the code in Genie editor. You can use anything you want, but Genie has a nice integrated terminal. So I can just hover over the Genie editor and the terminal, and you can see it is getting activated. So it's quite handy for me. I'm just going to compile our code with ruby xtconf.rb, and you can see that we have another file called makefile. It is created by the ruby xtconf.rb command, and now if we run make, you can see we have created a shared object file called donkey.so. If I do ls, you can see that we have the shared object file here. If I run ruby -r donkey.so and d -e p hello, you can see that we can require donkey.so. You don't also need the so file. And if I do it in IRB, for example, I have to do require relative to load the local files. Now I can do donkey.so, and you can see that we have required donkey.so. I can also get rid of the so extension. It is required, right? For now, it does absolutely nothing because we did nothing here, right? Now let's create one global variable. To create one global variable, you have to call this function ruby-c-ext, and let's call it $a. For example, if I do $a equals to 5 and then $a, it because yeah, we are running in bash and $a means something very, very different, right? So yeah, as you can see, I just created one global variable called $a. So let's do that in our C, shall we? Let's call it $a, and then we are going to assign a string to it. To create a new string, you have to do ruby-str new c-str, and then you have to give it one character, right? Like that. So you can do maybe ABCD, and it creates a string in C, and then it converts the C string into the Ruby string. So I can do this, and we also need the semicolon, and then if I run ruby-ext-conf.rb, we will create a makefile, and then we want to compile it. We just run make, and we want to run ruby-r donkey.so. We can just leave it like this, and we have to do $a. As you can see, it does nothing. As you can see, it does nothing because we need the quotation like this, single quote. As you can see, we have created a string called abcd and printing it in Ruby. So we don't have to run the make every time. We just can require the file, and it is defined. In IRB, for example, if I do require relative donkey and do $a, it's abcd. If I do $a.class, is string. We just created a new global variable called $a, and we are assigning it to a string abcd. Now there are various ways to create a string. This is the string part, right? So let me show you another syntax. We can do value a equals to or maybe abcd. You can call it anything you want. We are just assigning a value variable in C. In C, for example, you do int a equals to 5 or something like that, but maybe a equals to abcd. We also need the star here in C. But in Ruby, you just have to use value here, because value can be anything, right? A value can be array. You can do abcd equals to rb array new, for example, to create one array here. We are going to create string, and in the later videos, we are also going to take a look at arrays in depth. Anyway, so I'm just going to do rb-str new abcd, and we have to also give the length of the string. Let's do 4 right now, and then we are doing rbgv-set global variable set $a and set it to abcd, right? So if I run this, if I compile and run this code, I get abcd exactly. But if I make it 2, you can see it is ab. So we can pass the length of the string as well. But if we don't like to pass the length, if we have an arbitrary length string, for example, we can do rb-str new c-str abcd. We can also call it rb-str new literal abcd. It is the same thing. Now we can also define some ANSI characters and stuff. For example, if I do \e5m and \e0m and write Ruby here, you can see if I compile it, it prints this string. But if I do puts, you can see it blinks, right? The Ruby blinks. You can also use other syntaxes like rb-str new c-str here as well to create that. It is the same thing. Now we have created a global variable successfully, but there's a problem. You surely know that Ruby has a garbage collector. The values here are actually garbage collected. We have to protect global variables from garbage collection, because that could cause a segmentation fault error. Segmentation fault error is something like this. I don't know if it will do segmentation fault. As you can see, yeah, it does. As you can see, if I just get the address of abcd and set that to global variable a, you can see we crash whole Ruby, and this is very, very, very dangerous. If this happens in Rails, for example, the whole server crashes. From Ruby, of course. It doesn't crash the operating system, it crashes Ruby, and that can be devastating, right? it doesn't wait for anything, it just crashes everything like that. So as you can see, we have aborted core dumped. So we have to actually avoid this. And if we, you can also see some thing like this when dealing with the garbage collection. Don't worry about that. In our case, we are defining a global variable. We have to run this rb global variable and let Ruby know that it's a global variable. We are giving address of ABCD, and yeah, that's how we can do this to prevent the garbage collection from collecting this global variable. We have the same thing, but we have actually protected it, right? So that's it for this video. In the next video, we are going to learn about integers.